Back in the days, seeing the world was largely a pleasurable experience. Then, the unfortunate happened. The world changed. Adapt we must to these changes. New security rules, documentation, vaccines, and diplomacy now differ from nations to nations. Let's help you make sense of these complexities as we beam our searchlight on. Travels, aviation, tourism, lifestyle, and destinations, while learning the people, culture, and everything in between, one episode at a time. Introducing your host, Tayar Arishadare. Welcome to the Traviator. Learn the world.
Good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. This is still the Traviator, where we help our listeners learn the world. My name is Tayo Orishadare. On today's episode of the Traviator, we're discussing something that actually affects most travelers, especially those traveling by air. I'm sure most of our listeners at one point or the other would have experienced these rather nerve-wracking, not very comfortable scenarios, whether on the short haul or on the long haul flight. Often than not, these events really give us a very, very high nervous breakdown for those people that cannot handle it. And some people really have different coping mechanisms. I have a friend who, just because he wants to fly, would naturally just decide to resort to drinking a little too much. And in some cases, some people just pop a pill just because they want to go on a flight. So on today's episode, we will be talking about that very uncomfortable but rather familiar topic, turbulence in flight. As always, I will not be doing this alone, as is customary with us on the Traviator. We will naturally bring subject matter experts and not just academic experts, those that are experiential in this area of our topic for today. Who best to know this than a flying captain who's been experienced on different types of aircraft over the years. He's a commander, he's a chief pilot of one of Nigeria's most sought after airline, and I dare say beyond flying, he is extremely knowledgeable in different areas than one. I call him Captain Fantastic. Some people see him as a celebrated captain. Ladies and gentlemen, join me as I welcome with you, Captain Folu Oladipo.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
For that flattering introduction.
That is not flattering.
now I have to live up to that introduction.
Trust me, you're already living up to that introduction. Captains. Well, for those people who don't know him, and just some bad news to some prospective instance. Unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, Captain Folu is married and happily too.
Sorry, ladies.
How are you today?
I'm doing very well.
Welcome to the Traviator.
Yeah, I'm really honored to be here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
First, we want to say thank you very much for making time to join us, especially despite the rather short notice. We really do appreciate this.
I'm happy to be here.
And I'm sure that, just to rest assured, like they say, one good turn deserves another, but in some other places they say no good deed goes unpunished. So okay. Rest assured, we will call you to come more.
No, it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I'm happy to come back.
Thank you so much. So today, based on the topic, I know that even on a personal level, I have experienced turbulence for so many times. And I think for me, coping with turbulence happened to be something I grew up into because I'm in the industry. So I read about it. I have professional colleagues that are pilots who was able to talk us out of that initial fear. And for those people who do not have the kind of privilege I have being an industry person, and or those people who are still aspiring to be either flight attendants or who are aspiring to go on that long haul flight or short haul flight, and they've heard very, very gory stories. and very nerve-wracking and uncomfortable stories about turbulence. So for the purpose of these people, what is turbulence really?
So the best way to think of air in the atmosphere is like as a fluid.
Right.
Like look at any liquid or the gas or smoke.
Right.
It moves, and what primarily causes this movement is actually the sun, the heat from the sun.
Right.
And the way it hits the earth, different surfaces absorb it at different rates, and that causes it to move around. So if air moves up, some air will move sideways to replace it. There are no vacuums in the atmosphere, so the air keeps moving around.
That's interesting. No vacuum in the atmosphere.
Yes, there's no vacuum in the atmosphere.
So those gallopies and those bottles, where did they come
from?
So
I'll explain that.
Right.
So the turbulence basically is rapid changes in speed and direction. So the air usually is moving, but when it's very rapid, then that is what we call turbulence.
Rapid change in wind speed and direction.
It could be, for example, you can have wind blowing in a one constant direction, but it keeps varying in speed. And if that's very rapid, then you experience turbulence.
Yes. Okay. That's a new one. Yes. Because I remember that one accident that happened sometimes ago in Nigeria was because of low level wind shear.
Yes.
At a certain level. So I understand that's why the aircraft could not recover, because it happened very close to the ground. Is there any correlation between low level wind shear and turbulence in the air? Do they have anything in common?
So turbulence is something you tend to occurs around certain weather phenomenon, like a thunderstorm.
Right.
So low level wind shear tends to happen around concentrated thunderstorms. So basically the air drops. A very narrow column of air drops towards the earth. So usually you experience it, if you've ever noticed, especially like maybe northern Nigeria, it's more common, where all of a sudden there's this gusts of wind before the rainstorm.
Right.
So what actually is happening is that the thunderstorm drops a lot of air, and then that column of air hits the ground. And when it hits the ground, it only has two ways to go, sideways, left and right. So what it does is, that's what causes low level wind shear. Yes. So the aeroplanes can experience either downdrafts, as air hitting it from the top, or it can experience the change in the horizontal component. Exactly.
Okay.
And it moves in all kinds of directions. So when you have that kind of rapid change, then turbulence will be associated.
Okay, so it's not everything that blood of Jesus covers. So I know that blood of Jesus covers a lot of things, but some things are just reduced to bare science. And just having a knowledge of it could actually help you dissipate that fear.
Yes.
So, knowing this and knowing the possibility of what actually transpired, and you still went ahead to becoming a pilot.
Well, one of the topics we have to study is meteorology. And I think one thing that travelers need to understand is, first of all, air travel is the safest form of travel. Secondly, your flight crew are not suicidal. They are family people.
Okay.
They have things to do after the flight. Some of them have to go to parties or go to church or go to see their kids. So they will not knowingly take you into these hazardous conditions.
Right.
Also, they have studied the weather reports, forecasts and reports to know what to expect on the flight. So I think that should be
some sort of consolation.
Consolation, exactly. Comfort to passengers who are traveling.
I'm laughing already. I'm sure we'll come to that, because sometimes we just think that these guys, do they have 9 lives? Or, what is it about them that you know that, hey, this place that I'm going to experience a pothole, and you're still saying, hey, shut my door, I want to the power, let's go.
So a very interesting point to note about turbulence is that obviously when air travel is an experience, and turbulence can ruin that experience. But turbulence most of the time is mostly more uncomfortable than dangerous. So it's what you experience on a commercial flight usually is uncomfortable. Flight crew probably know they're going to experience it.
Right.
And they knowingly go into it, but they know that they are not putting you in danger.
Yes. That actually takes me to my next question.
Okay.
Is turbulence in flight dangerous? or maybe at a certain altitude or under certain conditions, are there any time that turbulence in flight can be dangerous?
So there are 4 categories of turbulence. Light, which is basically barely noticeable. Then there's moderate, which is noticeable. You probably have your seatbelt on. You will notice the airplane bumping around. Then there is severe. Severe turbulence is you probably will come to the bar in the evening and tell everybody about it. You would notice things flying around, and if you are not buckled in your seat, you probably will. There's a risk of you actually being lifted out of your seat. Yeah. And then there is severe turbulence, where it's very violent movement of the aircraft.
Right.
And you definitely will notice severe turbulence. If you have a seatbelt on, you might actually have bruising from it. So severe turbulence will be probably driving down a bad road at really, 80 kilometers an hour. That is what you experience is severe turbulence.
Right.
It's very rare. And in extreme cases, yes, severe turbulence can be dangerous, where it can actually exceed the design capacity of the aircraft. So in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when there was limited technology to monitor this kind of, especially thunderstorms, there were airplanes that did fly into severe turbulence and were lost. But we've not had anything like that in maybe the last 30 years. Yes.
If it's a consolation, we're in the age that technology has really affected and actually positively impacted a lot of things. If you're still within the 30-year bracket, whether in age or experience, you probably have been flying under very safe conditions in terms of technology. So maybe with this information, our fears are getting dissipated somewhat. Having said that, how does turbulence really affect a plane?
So aeroplanes, the wings of an airplane, the airflow of the wing of the airplane is what creates lift. And that's why the airplane needs to speed down the runway, get to a certain speed before it can generate enough lift to rise off the runway.
Right.
And then as it begins to climb, everything is a function of the airflow over the airplane. So remember I told you that there are 2 components of turbulence. There is the updraft, downdraft component, which obviously if anything hits you in physics, it will push you down or raise you up. So the airplane is flying through. It's like, imagine you're swimming in a river and you get a waterfall. You're going to follow that waterfall.
Right.
So if you're flying through a column of air and it starts to descend, you will descend with it. So there is that updraft, downdraft component. But then there's also the forward speed. We call it airspeed. So when pilots fly, they actually monitor something called the airspeed, which is the speed at which I'm flying through the air.
Right.
So, and that's what matters to a pilot. And so when you have like the concept of low-level wind shear, which you brought up earlier, what makes it dangerous is that when you have a very sharp reduction in the forward speed, what it does is that it reduces the lift. And then because you're so low to the ground, you might not have enough time to recover.
Right.
And part of recovering airspeed in an airplane is you actually need to kind of dive down to gain this airspeed. So that's what makes a low-level wind shear a bit dangerous. But pilots are trained to, basically what we do is avoidance. Majority of the time is avoid conditions where wind shear is likely to occur.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that was a lot of physics down there, and it's still very. I still don't know how to qualify it. When you're talking about this phenomenon, and you're still smiling. I guess that's why some of us are not pilots yet. So, and I think because you can smile about it because you're speaking from the position of understanding and knowledge, So, sometimes when we are going through a turbulent phase, and especially those one where you actually drop altitude, and the captain will naturally then the flight attendant say, "Ladies and gentlemen, return your to your seat and buckle up." So sometimes when they lose that altitude, I could sometimes really literally hear the engine like pouring for air that is not getting. That's the way it's just like the general slang in Nigeria now. Like say, He choke you.
He choke.
Like, this guy is like that engine is choking. So sometimes when it's losing us, it's like it's as though this guy is falling like forever. How far do planes fall during turbulence, or how far can they really fall?
To be sincere with you, for a majority of your listeners, turbulence you've experienced, the airplane is actually not actually falling per se, because the whether it's on an autopilot control system or the pilots are manually flying the airplane, like I said, the airplane is flying through a medium. So what the pilots are doing is they are consistently adjusting. So even though you might be maintaining 33,000 feet, the air is descending. So what looks like you moving straight, you're actually climbing to maintain that 33,000 feet. Okay. And that's why the pilots need to adjust the power to compensate for the... so if you have a downdraft, for example, you will need to add a bit more power to climb or maintain the altitude. And if you experience an updraft, then the pilot needs to slow down. Same thing with when you experience forward and backwards, the horizontal component of air. Then the pilots need to adjust the speed, because we fly exact speeds.
Right. Like you said, it's not because you guys are suicidal. You have families to return to, you have things to do, and you really want to naturally be the best in what you do and come back home safely to your families. Having said that, so it is not as though we are really dropping altitude. So we're falling off.
Like I said, in extreme cases, you can lose a lot of altitude. For me, I had one experience around Abuja where we lost. I saw 4,000 feet just disappeared.
Jesus.
4,000 feet. There was a thunderstorm cloud that just didn't appear on the radar. So we burst out, and we just saw it in front of us. We couldn't move, so we just put the seatbelt sign on, and then we went through it, and we lost 4,000 feet.
4,000 feet.
One was lost about 20,000 feet.
Right. 20,000 feet?
Yeah, but that was a different aircraft. It was a fighter jet. He was flying along. They don't have a weather radar on board.
20,000 is substantial.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Whether it's fighter jet or
it's a lot.
Or a commercial airliner.
But on commercial airliners, it's very rare. It's very rare. Maybe most of the time on a commercial flight, even when the weather is bad, 100 feet, 50 feet. It's not usually that much.
Wow.
Yeah.
20,000 feet.
Yeah, that's a very extreme.
Trust me, at that point in time, I'll be singing Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. You know. Okay, so despite all of this technology, all of this knowledge, all of the faces that go in it, how do pilots deal with turbulence? I understand you already said that you compensate for speed, altitude on a going basis based on the direction of the wind and all that. Do you really, at any point, get scared? After all, you're humans, you know?
Yes, so pilots are human, and I think the best, there's one of the training organizations, international training organizations, that says the best equipment on board an airplane is a well-trained crew. Good theoretical training as well as practical training. Right. So, for example, we have something like wind shear. Up till maybe 20 years ago, in Nigeria, there was not a lot of training on wind shear. But nowadays, most of the crew, the kind of simulators we use, the kind of access to information that crew have, there's a lot of good training. So when we go for simulator training sessions, we do exercises on low-level wind shear. Some of them, I've had simulator instructors replicate bad accidents, like there's a famous Delta Airlines crash on wind shear that changed training.
Right.
So I've had an instructor give me that scenario. It was really, really extreme scenario, and you know, it's really a big confidence booster to you.
Right.
When you go into these and
you're able to recover
out of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I've had a couple of very adventurous instructors who say, hey, let's see what you can do.
Hey, get on it. And somehow you've been able to come around, and like you said, that would really, really boost
it is a confidence booster. We have a couple of like maybe older generation pilots who, you know, they didn't have that benefit of training, and then they found themselves more like PTSD. They found themselves in scenarios
like this,
like very traumatic scenarios, and then it does they tend to be a bit more hesitant when they fly and see weather. Obviously, the young kid who's 19, 20, who's just coming out doesn't think it's a big deal till they experience their first encounter. So we've all had those really challenging situations. I've had maybe a dozen or a couple of dozen incidents like that where you're like, wow. You know.
So, yeah, I know my mother's prayer is still working. Okay, so because I had to ask this question because a lot of times I have to have very, very terrible turbulence in flight, and by the time the aircraft touches down, it's at the gate. The captain still steps out of the cockpit and just stand by the door and just welcome you guys and say, "Oh, thank you very much for flying us," with a smile. I just like, are these guys kidding me? Like, are you saying you're not feeling what I felt or something, or just trying to put up a face like, "Hey, I'm the dude here"?
No, actually, so one of it is which is one of the reasons why when I fly, I tend to it's communication. I tend to communicate well with my passengers because I like to preempt them. Even when I'm not 100% sure there will be turbulence, there's a possibility of turbulence. Right. I do let them know. I will say, hey, ladies and gentlemen, we're approaching an area of maybe rain showers. In about 5 minutes, we might start to experience some turbulence.
Right.
And it might last another 10 minutes. And when you actually do enter turbulence, what happens, I've noticed, is that the feedback from the passengers is very good.
Right.
Because it gives them a reassurance.
Yes.
So it's not that you're sitting down in business class discussing a nice deal with the guy in the 2A, and then next thing the airplane starts to shake.
Yeah.
But giving them that early warning prepares their minds. And then the fact that they know that, okay, the crew knows what they're doing.
Right.
I think that's very important. The other thing for pilots, why we don't tend to panic, is because we are in control of the airplane.
Right.
We can see what the airplane is doing. But for the guy sitting in the back of the airplane is wondering, hey, do these guys really know what they're doing?
This guy alive. And I'm like you said, just even coming on the PA and saying something does really help to calm our nerves, because at least not being who's in charge of this aircraft, he's still speaking.
Yes.
So having said that, and I know that being a pilot, being in command most of the time, also being a passenger on a lot of flights, how would you advise the passengers to deal with a turbulence flight when they're on board? So as a passenger,
the first thing would be to trust your crew. Like I said, the crew are not there to they're not suicidal.
Right.
So your crew are there for your safety. That's their primary, especially the cabin crew. The cabin crew do not get enough credit for what they do. You know, they're there for your safety. Even when we put the seatbelt sign on, your cabin crew will actually walk through the cabin, putting themselves at risk just to ensure that everybody's belted in. So follow their instructions. The second one I would advise people is always keep your seatbelt on, even when it's not requested.
Right.
Because there's also what we call clear air turbulence. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you don't actually anticipate turbulence, and then you just get this violent jolt on the airplane. So I would advise people to wear that. Nowadays, we're in the information age. There's actually weather forecasts that are available on the internet. There are apps that you can see. So if you're going on a flight, why not just check so that when you know it's raining, it's not a surprise to you. I think with the human mind, once you know, you mentally prepare yourself, then it's no big deal. But for what I would just say is trust your crew and just know that you're in the safest form of travel.
Right.
There are very few airplanes that fall out of the sky due to turbulence. So
right.
That's the most important.
Okay, so there's this myth around turbulence also, and even in my native Nigeria, there's that perception that size does matter. So you will still see a lot of people that say, which airline is flying? Say, what type of aircraft? And they say, is it maybe Dash 8Q 400, whatever, all this turboprop, smaller aircrafts. I say, which other airline? Say, that one is, which aircraft? That's why 737, 800, 500. I say, yeah, please book me that one. Are bigger planes safer in terms of turbulence?
So I wouldn't want to use the word safer. Yes, aeroplanes do ride turbulence different. And it's not necessarily by size. Size is a factor because a large vessel has more momentum, so it will ride the gust differently. So obviously, an A380 would generally ride the gust better than a Cessna, a little small Cessna light aircraft. But then it's not entirely due to the size. There is something called aspect ratio. Aspect ratio is basically when you look at the wing from the top, how thin it is.
Right.
So generally, something like a fighter jet would ride turbulence, even though it's a smaller, they are small.
Because it's slicing through the cloud.
Yeah, because the wings are very more fat if you look at them from the top, as opposed if you look at a light aircraft. Light aircraft tend to have long, thin wings.
Right.
So because those long, thin wings are designed to maximize lift. So when they do enter into turbulent conditions like updraft and downdraft, they react more to them.
Okay.
So it's a function of one, the size, but then it's also a function of that aspect ratio, the wing design.
Right.
So airplanes that are designed for speed, they tend to have more thicker when you look at them from the broader wings,
right,
and shorter, while the aircraft designed for lift, like I don't know if you've seen the gliders.
Right. Yeah.
The gliders they have very, very, very long, thin wings. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. So a glider will not ride turbulence very well. Exactly.
See, education is a very, very form of really, really getting that inner peace that you desire. And like I always say on the Traviator, we have our truth, and there's the world truth, and we actually hope to bridge this gap with understanding. So, Captain Folu, some people also think that if you want to avoid going on a flight that is turbulent, that there are certain time of the day or the year that you should fly to avoid turbulence. What is the best time of maybe the day or the year to really fly to minimize the risk of being on a turbulent flight?
That is very local because there are local weather phenomena. So, for example, what you'd experience in North America, in Minnesota, is not the kind of weather you experience in Texas, and it's not what you experience in Lagos is not the kind of weather you would experience in Algiers.
Right.
So, but generally, I would talk about this tropical region. Generally, updrafts and downdrafts, like I told you about the heat.
Right.
Generally, the hottest time of the day is actually around 3:30 p.m. And so if you're going in somewhere like Abuja, Jos, around that time, there will be a lot of updrafts and downdrafts as you get towards the last 2,000 feet, the last 5 minutes of the approach. So there's a chance that you'll get that bumpiness.
Right.
Early morning flights tend to be very smooth because the weather patterns have not built up. But then also we have the dry and rainy seasons. It used to be very well defined, but it looks like with global warming now,
it's just melting into each other.
We had, I think on in the Christmas week, we had a huge thunderstorm here in Lagos, and it's not really clearly defined. So the Harmattan season is actually a very good time to travel. The beginning of the, I would say not even the beginning and towards the end of it, when it's not really intense. Because also what happens in the Harmattan season is that you don't have thunderstorms. You shouldn't have thunderstorms on paper, but theoretically, but you have what they call a turbulence layer, and I think it's because of the winds.
Right.
So if you have elect the altitude, the best altitudes to fly. So like in Harmattan, what I've noticed is that between about 27,000 feet and about 31,000 feet, you have this turbulence layer. The air there tends to be a bit rough. So what I tend to do on my flight is I try to fly higher than that.
Oh, you stay at 26,000.
Yeah, there are a lot of pilots who just stay below, fly a bit low, but that consumes a lot of fuel. It's not very efficient. Right. So what I tend to do is climb, and then I also brief my passengers saying, hey, it's Harmattan season, we're going to climb through. It's unfortunately between when you buy your ticket and when you travel, it's not very
the weather for that go in between.
Yes, exactly. Things can actually change in 24 hours. So there's I just say people shouldn't really sweat it. It's fine.
All right. So like he actually initially advised, there are quite a lot of technology at our disposal these days that you could actually check yourself when you want to travel, and maybe just so you are pre-informed of the possibility of turbulence en route. Maybe that information could actually help you ride the wave when it happens. Also, he was able to confirm to us that whereas size might matters, but aspect ratio might also determine otherwise. So that maybe the bigger aircraft are safer or the smaller aircraft are not safe might not be quite so. There are some other dynamics that actually also play when it comes to turbulence. So turbulence, like he also confirmed, might not necessarily be dangerous. It's just the airplane reacting to maybe change and direction of wind at certain altitudes when you fly. But if at all of these are still too much of technical jargons to a lot of ears, the truth is that pilots are also humans. Their fathers, their mothers, their uncles, they have a lot of loved ones that they really, really want to return to. It is a passion for them, but also a profession. But regardless of all of this, they are not suicidal in nature. So whenever you're riding that turbulent flight, maybe it might just help you that you pop in your airpod, play that your nice music, and rock to it while it lasts. Captain Folu, thank you very much for joining us. But what will be your final words to our listeners out there who might still have maybe that doubt, or maybe having been convinced now from the exposure into turbulence as a phenomenon?
There are every second or so there's an airplane taking off and landing. It's still the safest form of travel. Your turbulent flight is safer than your drive home or drive to the airport.
Right.
So you have well-trained professionals, from flight dispatchers to air traffic controllers to pilots to engineers and cabin crew who are there for your safety. There's a lot of systems behind the scenes that are there to ensure that your flights are safe. So I would say you should put your confidence in these people. In the organizations, you have the regulators, you have like the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, lots of audit firms who ensure that flights are safe. Also, airlines monitor their flights. There's something called flight data monitoring, where we check, look back at the flights to see how they were conducted. So be rest assured that there's a lot of people looking out for your safety. Yes, turbulence is more of a discomfort than a safety issue, and I would tell people to just calm down, relax, sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight, as we say.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. On the Traviator, we hope on this episode too, we've been able to help you learn the world by bridging your truth and the world truth with understanding. Until the next time that we come around again, my name is Tayo Orishadari, and we will see you on the next episode of the Traviator. Why not support us by following us on all our social media and also on our website. If you have any question, we'll be happy to attend to those. And if there's anything in particular you want us to talk about, be kind to reach us at 247@thetraviator.com. See you and God bless.
Thanks for joining us on The Traviator. Please stay up to date with us by visiting thetraviator.com. You may also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and all podcast outlets. Until next time, keep learning the world, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Traviator Podcast.